All right, y'all. I gotta go in on this one. All right. Now, this is a rarity for me. Okay, this is not gonna be a boxing video. This is gonna be something very different. This is gonna be pertaining to the NFL, the National Football League. For those of you who are from, who are outside the United States, who are my subscribers. Um, the NFL is the National Football League, gridiron sport. If you're not familiar with it, whatnot, this is what I'm going to talk about in this video, and the injustice that one particular player in the NFL is receiving right now, just because he stood up for what he felt was right. Okay. Now, the guy that's pictured in the first part of this presentation is Colin Kaepernick. Okay. Now, Colin Kaepernick gained a lot of national attention, not only for his rise to be a popular NFL player, not the most popular, but one of the popular NFL players, where he was a bench. He was a second string I think it was a second string quarterback who replaced an injured Adam Smith, who guided the 49ers into the conference championship in one year, come up short in a very close game, and then also guided that was against the Seattle Seahawks, and guided the 49ers into the Super Bowl against the Baltimore Ravens, where they also came up short. Very close game, and it was that year where the Super Bowl featured both brothers, two head coaches that are both brothers, naming in Jim and John Harbaugh. Okay, now Colin Kaepernick had decided to use his power, use his profile, his power of being a popular public figure, to protest against the United States national anthem. Okay, by kneeling down to the ground whenever the anthem was recited by a guest singer at the football games, before the football game, I should say, before the start. And this had garnered a lot of nationwide controversy, and eventually the international tabloids picked up on it as well. Okay, and the reason why Colin Kaepernick decided to kneel against the national anthem and protested the national anthem, because he is so tired and fed up with the oppression that's going on against African American males, against African American people in general, for the last decade, the last 2 decades, the last 3 decades, the last 4 decades, the last century, and many 600 years. Okay? Now, you got idiotic people out there like, Boomer Esiason. Even though I respect Boomer Esiason, he felt it was an embarrassment for Colin Kaepernick for doing what he did. And you got this bitch, and I'm sorry, you know what? I ain't sorry. I'm gonna call her a bitch. The bitch, Tommy Lauren coming out saying that Colin Kaepernick, what he's doing, he's un-American. He should be ashamed for doing what he's doing. And yet, this is the same bitch who railed against social programs like Obamacare, for example, the American health, the American the Affordable Care Act, whatnot, which she got caught red-handed, openly admitted that she's on the same very cold program that she railed against. Unfucking believable. Called out on it in a debate with Chelsea Handler. But anyways, get back to the topic at hand. Okay. Now, so I'm going to ask you, why am I going off, and why do I support Colin Kaepernick for his stance on this situation? Well, where do I start? It goes back to the fact my ancestors were subjected to unlawful labor, which is AKA slavery. It goes all the way back to more than 600 years. And after that, you had the Civil War era, where things started to change a little bit for the country, because the South threatened to break off from the United States entirely. They threatened to succeed, because when Abraham Lincoln was elected president of the United States, he threatened to end slavery and threatened to take away state rights on that, by signing off a Emancipation Proclamation law, which barred all the states to practice in unlawful labor. Okay, the South wasn't having it, so they threatened to break off and succeeded. Lincoln said, "Okay, if you want your right to secession, you're going to have to fight for it." So that's what prompted the Civil War. Okay, now, when the Civil War happened, of course, the South decided, when the South lost, okay, fine, they had to, they admit to defeat. The next thing you know, laws were drafted, whatnot, to, end slavery in its entirety. That's when, forced the Reconstruction era, okay? But the African Americans are still, were still receiving injustice to some degree, on many degrees, on many levels. Okay, there were laws that were drafted, particularly in the South, which is called the Jim Crow laws, which created segregation. Okay, segregation kind of limited African Americans' right to socioeconomic equality programs. You have other situations where when they had to ride the bus, for example, they had to ride in the back of the bus. They couldn't use the same bathrooms as whites, they couldn't eat in the same restaurants as whites. So it gave businesses the rights to bar African Americans from their establishments. That type of thing. Okay. And then you have like Emmett Till, for example. We all remember Emmett Till, right? A young boy in the state of Mississippi that was murdered. He was murdered unjustly, lynched, all right, because he allegedly was whistling, flirting with a white woman, okay, a 14-year-old boy, all right, and then his murderers, they were put to trial and they were acquitted. Interesting, okay, interesting. And then years later, to this day, the woman who accused him, named Carolyn Bryant, years later admitted that she fabricated the story and got the boy lynched. Okay, got the boy lynched, and fabricated her story, which got those guys off who acquitted him for the murder. I don't care, pretty much if she admitted it on stand or not that she lied about it, they would still have gotten off. They would still have gotten acquitted. So the fact is, you can see that. Oh, it goes after Emmett Till. Besides Emmett Till, you had Medgar Evers, who was murdered, gunned down unjustly in front of his home, and where his family was there. Okay, a civil rights activist, a leader, Medgar Evers, right? The killer named Brian Beckwith, I think Beckwith, the murderer, was acquitted for his fucking murder at that time. And then based off new evidence, there was a new trial against him in 1994, which convicted Beckwith. And yeah, rightfully so. It took 40 years later to do it. Wow. Okay. Actually, no, it took 31 years later to do it. Okay. But hey, what it is. Justice was served at that time. Okay. I'll say that. Yeah. You had Michael Stewart, who was unjustly murdered by NYPD officers in 1983. Then after that, you had Latasha Harlan, that was gunned down unjustly by a store owner of Korean descent. And that Korean descent owner was, pretty much lied about the situation, why she gunned her down. And it was caught on tape why how the whole thing transpired. And then yet somehow this Korean owner got off just like that. Cold-blooded got off that fact of that, Latasha Harlan was murdered unjustly. Okay, and that was a precursor to why the LA riots started. Not more so than the Rodney King situation. R.I.P. Rodney King. Then after that, you had the Imam Diablo. Then you had the murder in 1999 of Diablo. Then you had the Sean Bell shooting. And after that, the last straw that pretty much broke the camel's back with the Trayvon Martin murder. Then after Trayvon Martin murder, you had the Michael Brown murder. Then you had the you had the Eric Gardner murder, all that caught on tape, right? The officers were acquitted for that. And then you had the Philando Castile situation that was caught on tape. And then you had all these other freaking Tamir Rice. I mean, I can go on and on and on, man. This is really, you can see why Colin Kaepernick is frustrated with the situation. Okay? Very frustrated with the situation, okay? And then you got those out there who saying that, hey, if black people, don't want to be, if they worry about the lives when it comes to law enforcement, they should obey what law enforcement officers are doing. Well, idiots, it's very hard to make that case because you can see there's some people who do cooperate with the law, like, for example, who still gets gunned down unjustly by officers. All right, for example, that officer down in Oklahoma, what's her name? On Betty Shelby, who gunned down a Terrence Crotcher, right? You gunned him down, right? Yeah, there was a high-speed chase, and then when he gave up, he surrendered. He got out of the Terrence Crotcher. He got out of the car. Next thing you know, she shoots him, fatally shoots him, just like that. When the guy put his hands up, he was no risk at all of being a threat. Shoots him just like that, and that officer got suspended with pay, was acquitted for his fucking shooting. Ain't that some shit? You can see why Colin Kaepernick is frustrated. Remember, this was way before Colin Kaepernick, but you can see where he's coming from. The continuing oppression that's going on here in the United States. Okay? But he isn't the only one that's suffering this backlash for what's going on. Okay? Now, you see Craig Hodges, right? The guy on the left. All right? Craig Hodges had an 8-year career in the NBA, okay? He was an outspoken guy. He was part of the Nation of Islam, and yes, he criticized players that, particularly African American players or people who are in a position in power in the NBA of African American descent. He criticized them openly and publicly, I say, because he said, "Look, you guys are in position to make a difference. You make a whole lot of money. People revere you. You are celebrities. You should use that power to help those who are unfortunate, like the people in the urban community. You should speak out against the social injustice that's going on against African Americans." Okay, he openly criticized Michael Jordan, the guy that was standing in the right in that picture that just passed by. We all know who Michael Jordan is. Michael Jordan, he criticized him publicly, saying that Michael Jordan's not doing enough to make a difference for the unfortunate and the African American youth. Okay, so that infuriated the Bulls organization, because some of the coaches, I think it was assistant Jim Clemens at that time, even pulled over Craig Hodges and told him, like, "Look, man, you got to tone down your rhetoric. You're making a lot of guys uncomfortable with your candid, you being so candid and being vocal about your political activism." And that's what he was. He was a political activism. All right. So not only he spoke out and put the NBA on the spot, he also accused the NBA for not working hard enough to for the urban outreach, whatnot. But I think the last straw that broke the camel's back with Craig Hodges is that he, after the Bulls won the 1992 NBA Finals championship against the Portland Trailblazers, which was a very good team at the time with Clyde Drexler, whatnot. So he decided to show up at the White House. Of course, the Bulls were invited to the White House on behalf of the former president at the time, George H.W. Bush. Okay, and of course, Craig Hodges had so much disdain for the president of the United States at that time and his current administration, he threatened not to show up. Of course, I think the Bulls organization mandated that everyone had to show up to the invitation at the White House. Okay, so Craig Hodges complied. He said, "Okay, I'll show up out of respect." So when he did show up, he showed up in a dashiki. He showed up in dashiki. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with dashiki. Dashiki is a traditional West African clothing, okay? But apparently, when he showed up in a dashiki, the public didn't receive that very well. They found that pretty offensive. And then after that, he was let go. Just like that. The Bulls cut his contract. They let him go. And since then, after that, he could not be picked up by any other team, which is very strange in that particular situation. And Craig Hodges felt that he was being blackballed. And it was pretty obvious he was being blackballed, because the Bulls organization said that, well, you know what? The reason why we let him go because he was getting old. He couldn't play defense. And Phil Jackson pretty much undermined the Bulls organization's statement on that and said that, well, I find that pretty odd, because I know many guys who get picked up and they can't play offense very well, and they can't certainly play defense. They can't play offense very well, but they still get picked up. So I'm sure that infuriated the Bulls organization, because Phil Jackson didn't want to play ball to back up their claims about Craig Hodges. Okay, so Craig Hodges ended up suing the NBA for the damages, and of course they settled that in court. I don't know what the settlement were, what the terms were, but Craig Hodges was not really affected by that, because if you guys have to understand, opposed to the NFL, which is not opposed to the NBA and the NFL, the basketball is a very, very popular sport worldwide. And you can credit the NBA to that, because the NBA was so popular. It's so popular internationally around the world, as opposed to NFL, which is not totally popular. Okay. So due to the NBA's popularity, you have other countries that have various leagues all over the world. And Craig Hodges had the opportunity to go play overseas and make money doing that. So he wasn't going to starve. Okay. And so is the other guy here, Mahmoud Rauf, aka Chris Jackson, which I'll get to in a second. All right. So I find it also coincidental, after that incident with Craig Hodges, and some also argue, like I mentioned, that his connection to Nation of Islam was also the reason why the NBA blackballed and whatnot. And of course, some people wanted to point out that David Stern is Jewish. Of course, the Nation of Islam leader, Louis Farrakhan, is not a he's not a friend of the Jewish community, and obviously that's a very sensitive topic, whatnot. But yeah, it is what it is. But I know I'm dragging on with this. I'll get to Mahmoud Rauf. But Craig Hodges, I find it coincidental that the NBA, after Craig Hodges had came out and spoke out against the NBA's lack of effort to try to um, to reach out to the urban communities, whatnot. I find it coincidental that the NBA all of a sudden started to release the stay in school program, the educational campaign programs such as stay in school, it's your best move. I remember that. I remember that. Stay in school, it's your best move. Yeah, I remember that. I used to love those commercials back in the day. And they start releasing anti-bullying campaigns which featured players like Vince Baker and Patrick Ewing. I remember those commercials as well. And then they start to each of these NBA organizations start to implement programs where you have a community outreach where you have players go out and they perform community services in the urban sectors of the United States. So it's kind of coincidental that they did that, and I think it had all something to do with the Craig Hodges situation. Now, go back to Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf, all right, and I'll get back to Colin Kaepernick after this. Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf, the guy that you saw on the last slide, who was wearing the Denver Nuggets jersey, right? Now, we all know that Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf, people who don't know, was a very, very outstanding shooter for the Denver Nuggets. He was the original Steph Curry, if you think about it. He was a point guard, small point guard. Not very small, but he was 6 foot guy, but looked small against the other guys, whatnot. Didn't weigh a whole lot. But he was very good at very good rolling off a pick and quick release jump shot, all right, which he was always money with. He used to deliver that shot with great accuracy. And the thing about Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf, he used to deliver that shot in various angles, and it was like it's very difficult to come off the picks and put up shots like that from the 3-point arc. Very similar to what Steph Curry does, okay? And Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf, who was known as Chris Jackson at the time before he changed his name because he converted to Islam, Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf received similar backlash like Colin Kaepernick is doing. He, in many basketball games, refused to stand for the national anthem. And this was caught on tape until later in the season. This was caught on tape, and someone had protested against it. I'm not sure who made the complaint about it, but it got to the league's office, and the league saw tapes of this, that when the national anthem had played, he would go to the bench and sit down. Okay? He refused to stand for the national anthem. And due to the backlash, it created a backlash and firestorm with the public, where the public threatened to not go to the NBA games if Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf was playing, okay? And this is with the Denver Nuggets. Of course, the Denver Nuggets organization was in a bit of a bind, and the NBA was a bit of a bind due to the controversy. And the reason why Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf refused to stand for the national anthem, because he, like Colin Kaepernick, was fighting he was trying to protest against the oppression of African Americans, okay? So the NBA decided to suspend Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf for I'm not sure how long these suspensions were, but it cost Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf a lot of money. It cost him like over $31,000 per game, which is a lot of fucking money. Jesus Christ. So with that said, the NBA and Abdul-Rauf came to terms. They agreed that they came to terms, they compromised, and Abdul-Rauf agreed to stand for the national anthem, but at the same time recite his Islamic prayer during the national anthem. And every time this man touched the ball, he got booed out of the arena, even to some people in Denver. His home crowd booed the hell out of him. All right. And yes, he played a few more years in the NBA. He spent a couple more years overseas at one point, then came back in 2000 for a short stint, and then retired after that. So, like I said, Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf's situation, Craig Hodges' situation, yes, their situation is about the same, but they were not in a situation where they're going to be put in the bind, because they had options where they could go play overseas. They could take on coaching jobs like Craig Hodges was able to do. At the end of his career, he was able to take on coaching jobs. He at one point reunited with Phil Jackson, where he was an assistant with the Lakers for 6 years and whatnot. And Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf, I think he was he was coaching too at one point. So, and they were playing overseas. But the fact of the matter is this. Is that Colin Kaepernick, it's unfair that he's being treated the way he's being treated right now. Okay, so yeah, it's you know, it's sad and it's disgusting. Okay, it's disgusting that you sign a guy, like I mentioned earlier in this video, a guy who's coming out of retirement, by the way, who's coming out of retirement, gets a 1-year contract, $10 million for being an underachiever. Unbelievable. You got Shannon Sharp, a Hall of Famer, coming out against this, and you got Chris Carter, a Hall of Famer, all-time great with the Minnesota Vikings, wide receiver, coming out against this. Okay, and the NFL better be careful now, because now you have the power of social media, that you got a lot of people who sign petitions for this backlash of what the Miami Dolphins has done right now. They're threatening to boycott the NFL. There's people who threaten to not go to the games now because of the way Colin Kaepernick is being treated. So if you look at it from the NFL's perspective, they're in a very tough situation, because when this whole controversy started, you had investors who threatened to pull out because of the whole Colin Kaepernick situation. For what I've read, I think that's what I've read. I've read it somewhere. I could be wrong. Don't quote me on that. You got people who protesting not going to games unless Colin Kaepernick was not reprimanded, or if he was showing up at the games, even if he was playing or not, people were not going to show up and buy any more NFL tickets to games if he was there. And believe it or not, the NFL did suffer a very big decline because of the whole Colin Kaepernick situation. There's people who canceled their subscriptions with the NFL Network, because of this. So, yeah, they're in a very tough bind. So now they had, now you got teams who refuse to sign up Colin Kaepernick. It's a scheme to keep him out, get him out the way. All right, let's be honest, it is. But now, since he's not getting signed by the Miami Dolphins, you got the other fraction who's now refusing to watch NFL games because of this whole situation. So it's in a very tough situation right now, man. So it's like, if they do one or the other, they're going to get the backlash one way or the other because of Colin Kaepernick. But again, I support what he's doing. It's the right thing to do. And it's unfair that he's getting the backlash he's getting right now, because there's some people out there who wants to act like oppression doesn't exist, because it is a sensitive topic when it comes to when it comes to this country. Let's be real. It's a sensitive topic. But the fact is that somebody has to speak out against it. Like Craig Hodges has spoke out against it, right? He paid a price for it, but later down the road, he turned out to be okay. And Mahmoud Rauf, Chris Jackson, aka Chris Jackson, paid a price for it. Then you have Colin Kaepernick, who's paying a similar price, but on a much larger scale. But at the same time, you have to understand, back then, it was much easier to marginalize Chris Jackson and Craig Hodges, because back then there was no social media platform where people could really speak out in a vast majority to support them. The only way you could speak out back then is that the only voice you had is through the media. And of course, the media was very selective of who they wanted to showcase as a voice of expression. Now with social media in today's era, you don't need the media to have a voice. It's very powerful these days. There's various platforms that you can speak out against situations like this, like YouTube, and you have Instagram, you have Twitter, you have all type of programs. Hell, look at the President of the United States. He's vocally on Twitter. He speaks out all the goddamn time, and yeah, it's crazy and it's idiotic the way he say things. But yeah, I'm just giving an example that the power of social media these days is very powerful, and anything you say can resonate to a certain electorate, to a certain group of people. So anyhow, yeah, it's not going to be too easy to marginalize Colin Kaepernick, as opposed to what the NBA was able to do with Mahmoud Rauf and Craig Hodges. So anyways, let me know what your thoughts about this. Do you agree or disagree what's going on with Colin Kaepernick? And keep it respectful. Like I always say, I'm out. Peace.